Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of the Benchwarmer Sports Podcast. I'm Raffi, joined by Davian. Davian, it is that time of year, one of the most
It
wonderful
is the
times
most
of year,
wonderful time of the year.
and you might be wondering, Raffi, isn't every time of year a wonderful time of year? And I would say absolutely, absolutely. But this time of year is always particularly great, partially because of the holidays, also because the college football playoff, and with the first round of quarterfinal matchups beginning this Friday and also on Saturday, I think now is a great time for us to go through the entire bracket, give our predictions, and let you guys know who we think is going to win the college football national championship. But before we do that, as is customary on this show, Davian, how are you? The people want to know.
I've been great. And, we're talking about, the FBS playoffs. But let's talk also about the FCS playoffs because the Ivy League will now be participating in the football conference. I don't know what it's called, but the FCS playoffs. So, hey, you might see Cornell football out there playing, which is going to be pretty hype. I also was listening to Charlie Baker, the the president of the NCAA, and it sounds like we might get the whole NIL debacle that they're seeing right now cleared up, especially after this court settlement that happens in April between the NCAA and the players. But beyond that, I'm pretty excited about different things. Rangers aren't doing that great, but it's all right. We're clearing out house, got rid of Kako, got rid of Truba. Yankees picked up Cody Bellinger. Thank you, Raffi, and to the Cubs for helping us do that. But
Yeah, of course. You
Raffi,
can
back
thank the
to you.
Astros for that. Yeah, Kyle
Yeah.
Tucker, very excited about that, who is better than not only Cody Bellinger, but also Juan Soto. So I think sorry, I'm watching the
All
Blackhawks. So
right.
the
That's
Blackhawks on in the background. Anyways, the Cubs here, massive winners, picking up the best outfielder that was possibly available. So I'm quite happy. And Davian, as I mentioned, OMG, Juan Soto goes
fair
to the
enough.
Mets. I know we're not talking. I know this is a college football playoff podcast recording, but
I know it is. But I feel like
but
we
Juan
need to
Soto
quickly touch on
going
it.
to the Mets, I'm very happy about this because I'm glad
That's
he's
crazy.
not on the Yankees.
Yeah.
But as I
Yeah,
said
I mean, honestly,
previously,
like, why would you want to be a second man to Aaron Judge at the end of the day, right? Like, no matter what, he's always going to be second fiddle to Judge. When he goes to the New York Mets, and now you're the top dog, like everyone, you are the judge of Queens, I guess. So it's insane what's happening in baseball as well. Just all the moves going around, but we'll definitely touch on that next week. But today, we're going to talk about the college football playoffs, as we mentioned, and we're going to go through, break down our brackets. Going to hear some good takes from Rafi, some bad takes from me. It's like the usual. What happens? I'm going to make some Cinderella stories, hopefully manifest by what I say and what I do. But Rafi, how about you kick it off?
yeah, first I just want to say too, David, I'm very glad that you took some time to come up with this. I know it probably took you quite a long time because
Of
Tulane's
course,
not in the college football playoff.
it's
Alabama
not.
is not in the college football playoff. Rutgers is not in the college football playoff. Davian, you are down your top three picks.
Okay,
I'm
okay, but
I'm quite proud
respectfully,
that you're showing your face on this podcast and did a fair amount of research on these other
all right,
teams.
all right, all right. But I do want to say this. A few years ago, I predicted Oregon would win the Big Ten and the Pac-12, and they've done that. They've completed and manifested my dumb take into reality. And so I just need to make a quick comment.
David, as much as I want to back you up on that. You said the Big 12 as one of the two. I believe it was the Big 12 and Pac-12 or the Big 12 and the Big 10, but you did not. You did
I
not
said the
check
Big
off
Ten.
both those boxes.
Okay, okay,
I
okay.
don't think you did, but
You know what?
we'll run
I
it
did.
back.
I will agree to disagree.
Okay, we'll run back the tape at some point. But anyways, let's start off with the
Yeah,
first
let's do it.
quarterfinal matchup: Texas versus Clemson. That we're discussing. The first one is not Texas Clemson; it's Indiana Notre Dame. But anyways, to get to the point, Texas Clemson. David, I'm gonna hand it over to you first. What are your thoughts on Texas Clemson? Who do you think's gonna win and come out of this matchup?
Look, it's going to be a competitive game. This is a Clemson team that people are really writing off, I feel. And in the past few weeks, they've really been starting to really pick up their gameplay. And I really like this Clemson team, but I'm sorry, I don't see how, and I know this Texas team has been struggling, and I hear everyone yelling and calling for the benching of Quinn Ewers. And I do in part support that, but also Quinn Ewers has played for them. He knows the system. This is the biggest stage of the career. You don't want to be throwing Archie into this kind of spotlight. So I'm gonna go with Texas. I know they've been struggling, and that's why I think it's gonna be a closer game than people might expect, and the odd makers and bettors might expect. But I gotta take Texas.
I have Texas winning as well. I think Texas's defense has been phenomenal this entire year. Yes, they've had some slip ups, primarily that first game, that first matchup they had with Georgia, where Georgia kind of ran them out of the stadium to start the game. But then
Yeah,
Texas defense still did a good job holding it down in the second half after Georgia got a big lead. I agree with you. The big storyline, just in general for Texas football this year, is Quinn Ewers. He was really solid to start the year, but that ankle injury seems to have limited his mobility. He was never really too mobile of a quarterback, but now it seems like he's purely pocket passer. He's not really mobile right now. Obviously, his draft stock is completely tanked this entire season just because the down year he's had. And I would understand if they decided are like, hey, like we want someone more mobile. We want someone who's played before. Arch Manning has played a couple games this year, so it's not like you're just throwing him immediately just to the wolves. But you'd have to imagine that if Texas gets off to a rough start versus Clemson, or if Texas winds up winning the game, but there's no like Quinn Ewers looks rough, he looks shaky, he turns over the ball, etc. You'd have to wonder if Steve Sarkisian, noted Armenian, would decide for the next matchup versus a better team in Arizona State on going to Arch Manning and having go in and step in and be the starting quarterback for Texas. So I think that's an interesting storyline to watch. I saw Texas being Clemson just because Kate Klubnik was destroyed by Georgia. Clemson's entire team was destroyed by Georgia. That was the best team they
yeah,
played all year. I treat Georgia and Texas kind of in the same tier, even though Georgia's been Texas twice. And aside from that, Clemson, as you said, played well down the stretch, has a very solid defense. But again, I don't think they're going to hang with Texas at all. And I have Texas winning pretty handily over Clemson.
yeah. I think you touched on everything, and definitely a more detailed take than I had. But I agree with you on that. Let's jump up on that side of the bracket now to Tennessee against Ohio State. Rafi, who do you have?
I'm intrigued to see who you have because I know, and this is another, you know Michigan to choose from either. Davian, you gotta help fund these programs that you're investing your opinions into because
Hey, I
they are
mean, to our
struggling now.
viewers, Shop Fishing Penguin, I'll be able to sponsor your teams. Sponsor Michigan, Rutgers. Gonna give some good NIL money.
Yes. Anywho, getting back to my prediction, I have Ohio State beating Tennessee. Yes, Ohio State looked terrible versus Michigan. I completely understand
Yeah,
that. I was
yeah,
along those lines too, but I had a revelation, and this revelation was I think the continued losses to Michigan is more of a mental hurdle for Ohio State. Ohio State tends to beat those really high caliber teams that they go up against. They just came within a point of beating Oregon at Oregon. They handled business versus Penn State. They handled business versus Indiana. They played well the entire season. The offense looks good. The defense has looked really good and has come together, especially in the second half. So I still think Ohio State is going to beat Tennessee. Tennessee has a solid run defense. They have a solid defense in its entirety. But the offense concerns me. I'm a leave Imalaliva. I don't sorry. There's just an absolute shank of a pronunciation of Tennessee
yeah.
starting
You tried
quarterback.
it.
So if you guys want to hear that, that's great. But he's been up and down this entire season. The Tennessee offense has been good. It's shown some signs of being a really solid offense, but it's also shown some signs of not being great, especially for Georgia a couple weeks ago. So it depends what type of offense we see from Tennessee regarding how close this game is. But I still think Ohio State winds up winning this game. Again, yes, they lost to Michigan in a poor fashion. Yes, they're whiny losers for trying to bring to the Ohio State Congress a bill to ban people planting their flag onto Ohio stadiums because you guys are salty that you've lost to Michigan 4 years in a row. But anyways, the point is, I still think Ohio State's going to beat Tennessee. I just think now that they're not playing Michigan, that mental barrier is gone, and I think they'll show up.
Yeah, well, I think you're 100% right about that mental barrier against playing Michigan. I mean, it's Big Blue. I mean, it's Go Blue. It's very hard to beat them. And what I'll further add on is that Ryan Day is playing for his job this game. I know you can make the argument, well, this Ohio team has been so successful throughout the season. Why does it matter if they win or lose? It matters because when you lose to Michigan, you know, countless years in a row, you need to make up for it. And the only way Ryan Day can make up for it and not have his head on the chopping block is by winning this game. If you lose next week against Oregon, fine. You know what? There still will be questions about Ryan Day and whatnot, but this man is playing for his job. This Tennessee team, I don't think they're playing for as much as this Ohio State Buckeyes team is, especially after such an embarrassing loss to Michigan. These this team is being clowned on nationally. They're being called losers. They're being called uh, I guess, pardon my French, but pussies for like that bill that was brought up in the Ohio legislator that they don't know how to lose and they don't know how to be good sportsmanship. And so what I will say is that this Ohio State team is playing for so much that I can't see them losing. Give me the Buckeyes this game.
Before we move on, I just want to talk about Ryan Day real quick. So I'm looking at Ryan Day. He stepped in 2018. I believe it was an interim after Urban Meyer got fired. So Ryan Day finished 2018 season 3-0. Then in 2019 he was 13-1. 2020 7-1, 11-2, 11-2, 11-2, 10-2. Made it to a couple of college football playoff games. Obviously has not won the national championship yet, most notably getting blown out to Alabama a couple years ago. I'm going to play the devil's advocate here and just say, Davian, and you don't need to come up with something on the spot. This is purely rhetorical, like answer wise. If they fire Ryan Day, what is a better option right now? They've been putting together season after season where they're consistently either winning or essentially in the Big Ten championship. I know they didn't make it this year, but the point still stands. They're constantly in. They're constantly one of the top teams in the Big Ten. They're a consistent college football playoff consideration team. They're consistently ranked in the top six. They've always been in that bubble of, oh, they could get in if something goes their way. Oh, like they just need to handle business. They've always been a fringe college football playoff team in the 14 playoff. This year, they made it in the 12 team college football playoff. I personally, this has been a season revelation for me. Theodore mentioned it, who one day he will be back on this podcast, we hope. Theodore, months ago, when we were doing our initial college football predictions, mentioned the fact when I brought it up, I was like, do you think Ryan Day gets fired? And he's like, what's a better option? He's consistently done great. He hasn't had any egregious years of like, okay, you have to fire him. And I agree. I think if Ohio State were to get the brakes being off them by Tennessee, then I think it's a conversation. But if they lose a close game to Tennessee, yes, there's going to be a lot of people annoyed. A lot of people are going to be calling for him to be fired. But at the end of the day, unless there's a high caliber like NFL coach or like someone else or like Nick Saban comes out of retirement, I don't think there's really any better options for Ohio State in comparison to Ryan Day. Why, like, at some point I think Ryan Day will break through with Ohio State. We had the same conversation with Jim Harbaugh years ago where, oh, he keeps losing to Ohio State. He keeps losing to Michigan State. He can't get over the hump. He can't do this. He can't get into the college football playoff. And then they finally broke through and then made the national championship back-to-back years. Lost the first time, won the second time. I'm just saying, at some point I think it's going to click for Ryan Day. I just think that sometimes he's just a little too aggressive, and that aggressiveness is like Dan Campbell, what we say. There's that line, and you just need to find where that line is. And I think once Ryan Day finds that line and they get over the boogeyman of Michigan, I think they'll be pretty successful. But I think it would be an emotional move if they let go of Ryan Day if they lost a close game to Tennessee.
I can see that argument, but there's one person that I know will get fired if they lose to Tennessee, and that's Chip Kelly, the offensive coordinator.
Oh,
I
100%.
I do
They need a better
I,
quarterback, too.
think I think his head's already on the chopping block right now. But I think he's definitely going to be cut if they lose this game. And definitely a new QB is definitely. I mean, also just with the transfer portal, I know we said we're not going to really get into it, but there's so many QBs in this transfer portal nowadays that you'll find someone. Like, yes, by the time this game is, when are they playing? They're playing this weekend, right, Rafi?
Yes, Saturday night.
So right. So if they'll only start being able to recruit for quarterbacks on Sunday. So in reality, because they most likely are not actively recruiting for a quarterback while in the playoffs, right? So it'll be tough for them to really get someone, but I don't see this Ohio State team losing. So
Right. All right. Let's move a little quicker through this other one. SMU versus Penn State. I have Penn State being SMU. Penn State has all the advantages. They have the weather going their direction. They have the stadium environment. Happy Valley right now is just going to be going wild. They have the talent. I think Penn State is for sure going to beat SMU. They looked great versus Oregon. They fell short in the Big Ten championship. Normally, Penn State handles business versus teams that they should beat. They beat the teams that they should. They lose to the teams that they're expected to lose to. And SMU is a team that I expect them to beat. So I have Penn State over SMU. I'll just keep it short and simple.
yeah, I'm gonna keep it short and simple too. I have SMU beating Penn State. SMU is
Wow.
my Cinderella runner.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay. So we'll get
They're,
into that
they're,
later.
they're more upset. I'm not going to
I'll,
elaborate more. I'm not going to elaborate more because
yeah,
I
of
don't want
course.
this to be a TikTok clip. But I have SMU beating Penn State in Happy Valley, but then I have them losing to Boise State. I know we're not getting that far deep into the predictions just yet, but that's what I'm seeing.
Okay. I thought you were going to have SMU go a little further than that. So that won't go too
No.
crazy.
It's just like
And
it's
then
just a
last
small.
And then the last matchup, the Friday night matchup, the day of this podcast being uploaded, Notre Dame versus Indiana, an Indiana matchup, state of Indiana matchup, two schools in
Yep.
Indiana. How many more times can I say
Yeah.
that in different ways? I have no idea. Tune into the next edition of the Benchwarmer Sports Podcast. Indiana, Notre Dame. Okay, this is another revelation. I swear I'm not becoming Aaron Rodgers. I will not start closing the lights and doing podcasts in the complete dark. I'm not that crazy. Anyways, Notre Dame versus Indiana. I was planning on coming onto this podcast, and I was thinking earlier today when I was working out, and I was like, am I really going to pick Notre Dame to beat Indiana? Am I really going to have Notre Dame beat Georgia in the next round? We'll talk about Georgia shortly. And then I listened to the wise words of Joel Klatt, and I realized, you know what? I'm going with Indiana. I'm going with Indiana over Notre Dame. Both schools have very solid
Wow.
defenses. Notre Dame, very, very run heavy. If
Wow.
Indiana can put Notre Dame in a situation where Riley Leonard is forced to throw the ball, I think Indiana has a solid chance of winning this game. I will also say, too, although Notre Dame has a solid defense, they just allowed 35 points to a post Caleb Williams era USC. This USC team is not good, and the fact that they allowed 35 points to them is also an a big cause of concern for me. Also, extreme bias, but regardless, it's still something I want to note. And my last main point: Indiana played really close with Ohio State up into a pivotal moment towards the end of the first half, where there was a blocked punt. That blocked punt later snowballed into a 20-plus point loss to Ohio State at Ohio State. Now that
Yeah.
they've lost to that was Indiana's first test of playing a really high caliber school. They failed that test. But if they can learn from that, they can be more disciplined and they can be better on special teams. If they can take those away from that game, they can play much better, and I think they can pull off the win over Notre Dame. So I'm going Indiana. Believe it. Yes, extreme bias, but you know what? These are my facts. I'm going with it. As delusional as it might sound, I think I've crafted a decent enough argument where I'm going to believe for the next 24 hours of this recording being done that Indiana will beat Notre Dame in the first round of the college football playoff.
Yeah, Rafi, I'm gonna just have to disagree with you. This Notre Dame team is
Ah,
just. I'm sorry. You know how much I hate Notre Dame, Rafi. The only person that hates Notre Dame more than me is you. right? Like, let's be honest. You're the kingpin of Notre Dame haters, respectfully, and it's truthfully it's truthful and
I
it's
take great pride
righteous
in that.
cause. You should take great pride in it because they're frauds. But as much as they're frauds, they're also a very good football team. And I understand, and I do agree with that take where if Riley Leonard is forced to throw the ball, um, this Notre Dame team could very much struggle. But I just don't see this Indiana team if Notre Dame is really able to kickstart off things. I don't see how Indiana is going to be able to keep up the same way that they were unable to keep up with Ohio State. But in any case, I won't go too much more into detail than that. That's my take on it.
All right, we'll move on into the
Yep.
next round. So just going through, we'll just go quickly through. I have Texas beating Arizona State. I like Arizona State. They've been one of the hottest teams over the past couple of weeks. They beat a bunch of notable matchups. But again, I'm gonna bank on Texas's defense holding strong and overcoming Arizona State's really hot offense of late. I have Oregon being Ohio State. It's hard to beat a team twice in a season, although Georgia did it earlier with Texas. I have Oregon being Ohio State at a neutral site at the Rose Bowl. Oregon travels very well, and this game is on the West Coast, so it's going to be essentially an Oregon home game, even though Ohio State also travels quite well. And I just think Oregon's better. Dylan Gabriel's been great. More on Oregon in a little bit, not to get too ahead of ourselves. Penn State versus Boise State was almost going to pick Boise State, but I just like Penn State a little bit more. Abdul Carter has been great on the edge. Penn State has a really solid defense this year, and you can't keep JT in check. JT has gone up against a top 10 defense in Oregon early in the year where he absolutely shredded them, but I still think Penn State gets the edge over Boise State. And lastly, Indiana versus Georgia. I have Georgia beating Indiana, even if Carson Beck is not the starting quarterback for Georgia. David, your quarterfinal predictions.
Yeah. So you said you have Georgia beating Indiana, correct?
I have Georgia over Indiana, PSU over Boise State,
Okay.
Oregon over Ohio State, and Texas over Arizona State. So my semifinals in the Cotton Bowl is Oregon versus Texas, and in the Orange Bowl, it's Georgia versus Penn State.
Yeah. So here's what I have. I have Oregon beating Ohio State, and then I have Texas beating Arizona State, even though I'm a big fan of Arizona State. And if you've watched our
Mhm.
previous videos, you could clearly see how much of a fan I am. I do have Georgia even beating. I have Georgia without Carson Beck still beating Notre Dame because I don't think this Notre Dame team is really that good. Especially, we're both arguing here that Indiana has a chance, and I don't think that Georgia. I feel like Georgia would wipe the floor with Indiana. Um, in terms of Boise State, Penn State, or SMU, I mean, of course, I have SMU winning, like I mentioned, but I have Boise State really taking that. I think this Boise JT can't be stopped. Like he can't. I don't care who you put against him. I don't care if it's Penn State. I don't care if it's Georgia. This SMU team is really good. And so my final four are Oregon, Texas, Georgia, Boise State.
Okay, so agreements on three of the four. Let's move in to our national championship. Winning the Orange Bowl, I have we are Penn State. I have Penn State beating Georgia. The big concern once again for me is the health of Carson Beck. I think
Yeah.
regardless, I literally take a guy who used to play for Iowa at quarterback, like a transfer from Iowa, over Riley Leonard on Notre Dame, and I take that guy also over whoever is the guy in Indiana. I pardon me for not knowing his name at the top of my mind, but anyways, I think Georgia, their quarterback situation, yes, it's a concern. That's why I have them losing to Penn State, but I think Georgia is still going to get past that first matchup versus the winner of Notre Dame, Indiana. So I think that'll hold them back at the end of the day. Either like Gunnar Stockton played solid versus Texas. He wasn't anything impressive to me in that SEC championship game. So I still think that that's going to be the big thing that holds them back. I don't think Georgia's defense or offense surrounding their quarterback, whoever's starting, is what we saw a couple years ago when we saw Stetson Bennett, who albeit did play really good that year. it felt like the rest of the team was really carrying him to that national championship. Although, again, he did pitch in quite well. Kind of like how Tom Brady gets carried in all his Super Bowls. But anyways,
What?
sorry.
Brady just caught a random ass straight. That's crazy. All right. Sorry, Raffi.
Anyways,
You're on a good tangent. Continue.
I wanted to make sure you were awake. I wanted to make sure you hadn't gone to sleep
I'm
while I was
well
doing
awake now, Raffi. I'm well awake.
Anyways, my point is, I don't think Georgia has the talent that they did a couple years ago, where I'm like, you can throw in whoever you want at quarterback, and I think this team is still going to go win the national championship. And we both have talked about how Georgia hasn't looked as good as they normally look in past years. So I do think Georgia is going to wind up losing to Penn State. I also then in the Cotton Bowl have Oregon being Texas. Similar situation. The quarterback situation is concerning me, especially with Quinn Ewers. And Oregon is just by far the best team in college football this year. They've looked great versus every team that they played against. They looked good versus Ohio State. They looked good versus Penn State. They looked good versus Michigan. I think Oregon is the team to beat, and I have Oregon versus Penn State in the national championship.
Yeah, so the health of Carson Beck is also very concerning for me. That's why I have Boise State against Oregon in the final. I just think this Oregon team. I said it before. I really think this Oregon team is going to win it all. So that's my prediction right there. I think Oregon's going to win it all at the end of the day. I just have this SMU. I think this look Georgia against Boise State is going to be a much closer game than if it was going to be Georgia against Penn State. And the reason why I say that, yeah,
Okay.
because sorry. Georgia against Penn State would be a much closer game than Georgia versus Boise State. Because I think if Georgia's able to stop Boise State's run, which I know, well, you can't stop Genty. I know, but if you limit him a bit and you really get a few 3-and-outs here and there, I think Gunnar Stockton is going to be able to do the job for Georgia. Against a Penn State team, it's going to be much harder. But again, I have Boise State in the final against Oregon. That's my prediction.
All right. Your national champion.
Oregon.
Gosh darn it. Yep, same here. no variety. We had our fun. You had your Boise State insanity run.
Yeah.
I had Indiana over Notre Dame, but fate, destiny, it all rides the same. We both have Oregon winning the national championship. And again, I think I've covered it quite well. I don't know if you have any other comments to make. Dylan Gabriel's been great so far this year. And Oregon is the best team in college football this year. They're the only undefeated team left in the college football realm. And again, they've beaten teams. They've beaten Boise State, Ohio State, Penn State. They really have been the best team in college football. And unless, God forbid, something horrendous goes wrong and the team just completely forgets how to play football, I think Oregon's the team to beat. And I think we are in agreement of why they are going to be national champions.
Yeah. I don't think I don't think even for the viewer that we need to go into more detail. I think if you've been following along this college football season, Oregon's team speaks for itself.
100%. So that'll do it for this edition of the Benchwarmer Sports Podcast, College Football Playoff Predictions edition. We both have Oregon. Let us know who you guys have winning the national championship down in the comments below. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, follow us on TikTok, Benchwarmer Sports. We have officially gone over and reached 2,600 followers. It took a while. Getting hyped over 2,600 followers, kind of crazy. But anyways, we celebrate our wins, even if they're small victories.
We celebrate all our wins.
Be sure to do it all, as I have previously mentioned. And for Davian, for me, we hope you enjoyed this edition of the Benchwarmer Sports Podcast, and we'll talk to you guys again soon. See ya.
Peace.